So hello everybody, thank you for joining this vitamin. I'm Chris, I'm the Customer Operations Leader for Tesco at P&G.
And I'm Kate, the Customer Supply Chain Director for the North at P&G.
And today we're going to give you an overview of demand planning.
So before we start, just a quick disclaimer, which we'll leave on the screen for you to read, but obviously we're not going to be discussing anything confidential related to pricing, strategy, etc. Please don't share or reproduce these slides without our permission. Okay, so what we're going to go through today then. First of all, I'm going to give you a very quick intro of who P&G are. Then we're going to talk a little bit about why we demand plan and why it's important. Then within demand planning, what's important to consider for your forecast, who are the customers of a good demand plan, and then a couple of case studies. So who are P&G? P&G are actually a $70 billion company, so one of the world's biggest FMCG companies. We have about 65 brands. Most people are surprised by some of the brands that we have, and you can see their photo at the bottom, majority of which I'm sure you'll recognize. We have 10 different categories that we operate within, and our products are sold in more than 180 countries across the world. So that's P&G. And now I'm going to hand over to Chris.
Cool. So why do we do demand planning? So I wanted to put up two very contrasting photos. The first one you can see a very stuck up warehouse, and the second one might look a little bit familiar to earlier scenes in the year, some very empty shelves in a store in Tesco. So demand planning really is the critical balance of how much inventory we hold and making sure that we hold enough to support sales, but not too much that we have to have warehouses the size of football fields. So really fundamentally, that's what we're trying to do. Now that is part of it, but it's not the only thing. So I mentioned you obviously want to be supporting the optimum sales for your company. You want to make sure you have enough stock, making sure all those sales are maximized. You also want to make sure that you have inventory to support that, but not so much inventory that you are having to build distribution center after distribution center and piling a lot of your cash into stock that you're not really getting anything from. So that's the two very key balances. Now, there's also a big part of demand planning which relates to cost. Manufacturing sites are very expensive things to run, and even more expensive when you have to upgrade them or have to build extra lines and put in extra capacity. So thinking even longer term, demand planning is super important in terms of looking at your business holistically and across the next maybe even 5-10 years. Do I need to build an extra production line? Do I need to take out a production line because actually a part of my business is shrinking, or some of it's growing? I need to plug in extra capacity to make sure that you are getting the right sales and also holding the right inventory. So really fundamentally, that's why we demand plan.
And so where does demand planning sit within the supply chain? Well, hopefully we're all pretty familiar with the physical flow or the product flow throughout the supply chain, which you can see there on the screen all the way through to the shopper. Actually, demand planning is all about the information flow. So passing information up the supply chain to ensure that it runs effectively. And obviously, the better the information, then the better the supply chain can run in terms of reducing cost, reducing cash, and improving our sales and service levels. Demand planning is key to all of that.
Cool. So when you think about demand planning, what's actually important? I think the question probably has unlimited answers, but I want to give you a few examples. A really big factor is history. What's happened in the past? If you've run a promotion before, if you've launched a product, you will have some data about how that promotion or product performed. That is a fantastic indicator of how it will happen again. If you have a similar price, a similar number of stores running a promotion, or if an online business, you're doing something very similar and your fundamentals haven't really changed, then it's very likely you'll repeat something. Now, not in every case, but as a baseline, that's a useful point. Now, tying that in, you can use various amounts of data. P&G, we have a lot of it, and we have access, and we're very lucky to have access to it. But if we think about our setup specifically, we have a lot of internal data of what we send to our retailers, Tesco, Asda, Morrisons. We also understand what happens at their levels in terms of a store. So what is selling out versus what we're sending to them. And we can then see, okay, well, if a promotion goes in store one day, how does that translate back to us? So you can then start to really get quite granular with your demand planning of what products will you need, what volumes, and when. Now, the best thing in the world, what we all like to do is plan. And so do our sales teams, our brand teams, our finance teams. So a lot of the information you also get will be what's going to happen in the future. So I'm going to run a new promotion, I'm going to launch a new product, and there'll be various different inputs and thoughts about how that will perform. That's a big thing to factor into that everything. Promotions, as I mentioned, is a big one. Generally, when you drop the price, you will get a huge uplift in demand. It's not just promotions, you can also have uplifts when things are seasonal. One of our businesses is air care. You may or may not notice if you're a very scent shopper that the SKUs will change throughout the year. So in winter, we sell different Christmassy flavors. In spring, you won't find those and we have to change them. But we'll promote them at different times and that will cause various peaks and troughs in the demand. Somebody will always come with a bright idea. My favorite one is always when my sales team, fantastic idea of something we want to do tomorrow and can we supply an extra X thousand cases. But underpinning all of this really is fundamentally what's important to your business. You need to understand your business inside and out to be a good demand planner. You will have varying factors of history, of data, of plans, of sales teams, of commercial plans, brand plans, finance. But really, you need to understand your business to know how to create the best possible unbiased forecast.
Okay, and so who are the customers of the forecast that you create? Well, demand planning is a really hot topic in the supply chain, and that is partly because the number of customers that look at the forecast and the outcome of your demand plan. So the first one is actually finance, so the lovely dollar image there, but it's really, really important for the company to understand, are you on or off track versus your sales and profit forecast? And so that there'll be a lot of scrutiny from the finance teams on looking at where that's coming out. In the bottom left, then you've also got the brand teams looking at the forecast, so really making decisions on where should we focus, where should we invest, what's popular with the customers, where do we want to put our advertising. You've got the sales as well, the sales team, looking at the forecast, and the sales team can really use the forecast to understand, am I on or off track versus my plan? Where do I see maybe risk to my sales plan? Where do I see opportunities? What's going well? What's not going well? And how do I need to adjust my strategy? And then finally, the manufacturing sites and the supply chain as a whole will use the forecast, not only now in terms of what stock should I be producing for today, for tomorrow, for next week, but also to make decisions on longer term structural investments. Where should I build my extra line? Do I need extra capacity in my warehouse because this particular product or country or group of products are growing? And a really good demand plan should start at SKU level and will roll up at all levels through the company then. So you will have, down to SKU level, it could be family or category level or production site level, right up until the company forecast. And of course, if you're a listed company, then that demand plan will feed all the way through to the stock market, your shareholders and investors, giving confidence, hopefully, in the company numbers.
Cool. So we wanted to take you through a little bit of a case study of what might happen when something can go a bit wrong. So looking at the effects of what happens if I over forecast. So if I, for example, launching a new product, I get all of my information from my sales teams, all my expectations. I'll probably look at some past data of how something's performed. If I over forecast it, what will happen? So for the shopper, they probably really won't notice very much. There'll be stock in stores. They'll probably have very full shelves. That's a good, reassuring thing, as we all know. My retailers, so Tesco's and Asda's of the world, will have a lot of stock in store and probably a lot of stock in their warehouse. And equally, me as a supplier, so will I. So I'm sitting on a lot of inventory that I've ploughed cash into because I'm expecting something to do especially well. If I then go through to all of my my suppliers, raw materials, packing materials, I've probably also given them the forecast ongoing and said, I need you to hold this much stock and be able to give me this much capacity. Really, we'll have a big position of being quite overstocked throughout the entire supply chain, which can have a huge effect on your profit. You're asking your suppliers to do things. If you're asking them to hold extra stock, you'll be paying for that privilege somehow, even if it's directly. And worst of all, if you get to launching the product and deciding actually it hasn't performed very well, we need to do something to get rid of all of this stock, you probably will have to reduce the price of it, meaning that overall your bottom line will not be as profitable as you thought. And Kate's going to talk us through what we might do if we underforecast.
Thanks, Chris. So obviously, in light of what Chris has just said, then you might be tempted to underforecast or undercall your forecast a little bit. We call it sandbagging when the account managers do this to us. Yeah, so you might be tempted to go with a more conservative forecast, and then of course we can all high five when the sales come in greater than expectations and what a brilliant job we've done. The reality is that when you underforecast, you've also got a similar set of risks and impacts to your P&L throughout the supply chain. So first of all, you're going to have a really disappointed shopper and empty shelves, which means that you're missing out on sales, which is clearly a big loss. And your retailers are going to be missing out on sales as well, which is really disappointing from them. So ultimately, you've kind of missed out on some of your sales opportunity. When you then go further up the supply chain, it becomes a scramble then to recover those lost sales. So you put additional pressure on your warehouse to try and get more stock out of the door faster than planned, on your manufacturing sites to try and produce faster than planned, and then on your suppliers to provide materials faster than planned. So all of that is drives cost into your supply chain as well. So clearly, underforecasting is also not the way to go. And the reality of what we aim for with the demand planning forecast is what we call a 50-50 forecast. And what that means is there should be an equal likelihood that you will over deliver as under deliver. So the perfect forecast is what we called unbiased. So if it's equally likely that you're going to under and over forecast, then you've achieved an unbiased forecast. So what do we suggest then as next steps? We've talked pretty high level about demand planning. So what the idea is, we suggest that if you're a demand planner or if you're somebody that is responsible for demand within your organization, do a YYY on one of the examples of a recent product that you've forecast, whether it's good or bad. So really challenge yourself to understand what happened, why did it happen, what was the root cause, and what countermeasures could I put in place to either improve my own personal demand forecast or the learnings within your company. And if you're not a demand planner, then the suggestion is that you take some time to learn about demand planning from one of your company demand planners or somebody who has responsibility for demand within your company. And in both examples, but especially if you're not a demand planner, here are some prompts for things that we suggest you discuss with your demand planner. Really understanding within your company who are the stakeholders for the forecast, and what challenges come with that. What are the key challenges that you have in your sector, in your market, in your categories, or surrounding your products in terms of forecasting, linked to the market itself, or it could be around your manufacturing capability or anything like that. And then finally, have a look at some examples of when you've got it right or wrong in the past, and really see what you can learn from there to further deepen your understanding.
So a big thank you for listening to us today. Hope you've at least had a bit of insight into demand planning and gained something from it. If you do have any questions, please send them through to IGD, who will pass them on to Kate and myself, and we will endeavour to get back to you as quickly as we can. Thank you very much.